Hello, my name's Florence. Welcome to the theobspod. I'm an NHS obstetrician, hoping to share some thoughts and experiences about my working life. Perhaps you enjoy Call the Midwife, maybe birth fascinates you, or you're simply curious about what exactly an obstetrician is. You might be pregnant and preparing for birth. Perhaps you work in maternity and want to know what makes your obstetric colleagues tick, or you want some fresh ideas and inspiration. Whichever of these is the case, and for that matter, anyone else that's interested, the theobspod is for you. Episode 94. A chat with NCT Practitioner Laura James. I am very excited to welcome today Laura James, who I've known for, I don't know how long now. And we kind of got up to mischief together at the London Clinical Network. Laura, I'm not totally sure how to introduce you. I suppose today you're kind of slightly in the capacity of NCT teacher.
Yes.
But do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Firstly, it's brilliant to be here, Florence. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really thrilled to be part of the podcast. And yes, today I'm wearing my NCT practitioner hat. So I started training with the NCT back in 2009. I did a bit of looking back to prepare for the podcast. I didn't realize it was quite that long ago, but
it was a
long time ago. Yeah. My son was 2 when I started training.
Oh.
And I got into training with the NCT because before then my degree was actually, or my master's was actually in interpreting and translating. And I found myself interpreting for the women's health department at Lewisham Hospital.
Oh, right.
So I was kind of, back in those days, it was amazing. We had, there was an agency that went in and face-to-face interpreting services were offered. I was kind of the continuity of care for these women because we would, come out of one appointment, make an appointment where all of us could make the next time, and then take it from there. So I was able to see women right the way through their pregnancies, which was just such a privilege. And at the time, I just thought, goodness me, it's so important that women and birthing people understand what is happening. Can you imagine going into an appointment and not understanding what's going on? So my interest was kind of sparked there. And then once I had my children, I just thought, right, how can I get involved a little bit more in maternity? Because interpreting and translating just wasn't going to be possible with 2 small children. And so I kind of scouted around and realized that NCT training would really fit in well with my family and my family's kind of, commitments. And so I embarked on the training, and so that's what happened.
Fantastic. And I love this conversation because I've already learned something about you that I didn't know. So being an NCT teacher, so first of all, what does NCT stand for, in case people don't know?
So NCT stands for National Childbirth Trust, and the charity has kind of moved away a little bit from using its full name, as the remit of the charity has widened. So we now talk about supporting parents through that transition to parenthood in the first sort of 1,000 days. So we've kept the acronym, but we don't really call it National Childbirth Trust anymore. We call it NCT. And NCT is a charity that supports parents through evidence-based courses that people can buy, through a free to access infant feeding support line, which is staffed by phenomenal breastfeeding counsellors. And we also have a network of branches throughout the country, which offer events and activities that people can go along to. You don't even have to be an NCT member if you don't want to be to go along to those. We've got, I think it's about 700 practitioners in total. Over half of those are antenatal teachers, of which I'm one. But we also have, highly trained breastfeeding counsellors. We have NCT doulas, and there's also postnatal leaders too. So it's quite a big network of people. It's a much wider community out there.
Yeah, I think that's bigger than I kind of anticipated. I think sometimes people think it's antenatal classes, full stop. Next, I think it would be great if you could tell us a bit about what training to be an NCT practitioner involved.
I think this is a really interesting question because many people might not necessarily know what the training was. So when I signed up to it, I think I kind of thought, this is going to be, quite good. But I didn't really realise how fundamental it would be, the rigorousness of it. It took me 3 years to do. So it's a 3-year course, part-time course. So once a month, I would trundle off down to Red Hill for my sort of tutorial days with a phenomenal tutor who actually now happens to be head of education at NCT. So kind of learned from the best, Kathy Finley, and with this phenomenal group of women, all learning at the same time. And yes, it was a 3-year course. We all graduated with higher education diplomas in antenatal education. So that's one level down really from a degree. So I think that's one of the things that people don't really understand about NCT practitioners is the level of training that we receive. So you're training a little bit in anatomy and obstetrics and midwifery, but we're not healthcare professionals, and we never profess to be healthcare professionals. What we are is sort of experts in how to educate somebody antenatally, so how to provide antenatal education. So it was very much about how adults learn, the sort of different learners that you have, group dynamics. There was, things on transactional analysis. It was fundamentally, rigorous and really kind of quite comprehensive. So a lot of on the ground, training. So going into antenatal sessions with other antenatal teachers and, facilitating certain parts of it and then coming back and learning, and lots on the reflective journey. So thinking a lot about our own experiences so that those don't get in the way of the information that we impart to other people. So really sort of, it's never about what the NCT antenatal practitioner thinks. It's all about, what's right for that person at that time. Lots about loss. So we had to do a lot of reflection on loss. Meeting diverse needs, transition to parenthood, thinking about how to structure an antenatal session, and how people would learn within that. So lots about sort of active learning and listening skills, body language, time management, all of those sorts of things were sort of tried and tested. And only if you passed all the different modules would you go on to get your license to practice.
Right. Yeah, because when I talked to you, it was a couple of months ago, I had the idea for this, because I'm ashamed to say, even though I've been an obstetrician for a long time and did NCT classes when I was pregnant, I had absolutely no idea how qualified NCT teachers are.
Yeah.
And I felt, wow, that's something I'm really ignorant about, and that's something actually that maybe talking today could make some midwives and obstetricians and support workers and so on, infant feeding team, etc., understand a bit more clearly.
Yeah,
because that sounds very thought out.
Yes,
and a considerable commitment and sort of quality assurance.
Yes, absolutely.
I think maybe other people don't necessarily realise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've been involved, I quite like learning. So I've done quite a lot of training and learning in my life. And I can safely say, hand on heart, that the NCT training is the most rigorous, comprehensive training I've ever been involved in. And to this day, I mean, I did it I got my license to practice 10 years ago this year, and to this day I credit NCT training with, I use it every day for something.
Gosh.
Yeah.
And you said to me when we met recently something about kind of maintaining that knowledge and information. So once you've got your license, you're now sorted, you're an NCT teacher.
Yeah.
What are the kind of ongoing requirements?
Yeah, there are. So every year you have to prove that you meet the requirements so that you get your license to practice renewed, as it were. Right. So you have to teach at least 30 hours worth of antenatal sessions a year. There you have to do at least 20 hours of continual professional development. So NCT is brilliant at providing its practitioners with study days and opportunities for learning more. So just on Monday, I was on a study day about gestational diabetes and people with raised BMI in pregnancy and how that, how that affects their care and things like that. So there's a certain amount of CPD that you're expected to do every year. There are assessments for newly qualified practitioners, and at certain points, over your journey, just to check that everybody's doing the, not the right thing, but that everybody's still maintaining those standards. And there's mandatory training that we have to do as well. So we have to do safeguarding training, GDPR, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity for sort of ongoing reflection with your peers, so you're never alone. There's always a group of people that in your local area who are practitioners as well, and sometimes we get together either online or when we can face to face, just to sort of reflect and chew over challenges and what went well and things like that. So yeah.
And do they look at feedback from the people you've taught?
Yes, so there is a mechanism where people can give. Obviously, pretty much every practitioner asks for feedback in some way. It might not be written; it could be verbal, or it could be that you kind of sense that things are positive. And if there was a client that had an issue, then you would hopefully sort of meet that client and try and work that out at the time. But yes, NCT does ask for sort of formal feedback, and that feedback does form part of the sort of ongoing assessment of an NCT practitioner. So, for example, if that feedback, was all 100% positive, then that's wonderful. If the feedback was, not as good, then it could well be that practitioner would be offered mentoring or peer support, meetings with practitioners, things like that. So there would be there's definitely sort of some quality assurance going on there.
And is there a curriculum? So if you're teaching classes, can you design the sessions and have a bit of freedom with how you deliver stuff, or is there a bit more fixed, you must cover this on this session type thing?
So that when I first trained, it was a little bit more fluid in terms of the number of hours, the format, all of that sort of thing. Nowadays, there is a bit more of a structure. We kind of call it a framework. So there are specific topics, specific things that an antenatal, an NCT practitioner will be asked to cover, and make sure that's within their course. But within that, there is freedom. So, you don't necessarily all have to do, say, for example, talking about cesarean birth, that can be anywhere within the course. And what we try and do is we try and layer that learning. So it's a really, really important part of the course, so that if a client misses one session, for example, then that doesn't necessarily mean that they've missed everything to do with that particular topic. It's very much sort of layering things in as we go along. So there is some flexibility within that, but each client, when they book on, will have the confidence to know that there is a framework that every antenatal practitioner sort of works towards.
So I wanted to ask you a bit about some of the kind of assumptions, because I think at work NCT is a bit it's a bit of a label, maybe. And with that comes some assumptions about possibly the type of person that goes to NCT,
right,
and the accessibility of NCT, I suppose. Do you have some thoughts about that?
Yes. So I would love to see high quality, evidence-based, free antenatal education for every single birthing person, birthing woman in this country, that's delivered by highly trained practitioners who are qualified in providing adult education. I think it's fundamentally important. I know in the past NCT has been commissioned by some NHS providers to deliver free antenatal education. I'm not sure if they're still doing that anywhere in the country. But yes, there is a charge for NCT antenatal courses. The cost covers 2 people, so there are 2 spaces every time you buy a course. And I think it works out, I had a look the other day, I think it works out as less than £10 per person per hour. For a lot of people, that's a lot of money. There are discounts available for households whose income is below a certain threshold. And there are payment options, so interest-free installments you can pay by as well. All of that is made accessible, made available when you go to book. So it's very clearly kind of set out there. And the revenue that NCT generate through the courses gets ploughed straight back into the charity. So, for example, the branches, the activities, the events that NCT holds, the infant feeding support line that's free to use, all of that gets ploughed back into the charity. I think it's also really important to talk about equality, diversity and inclusion as well. So NCT is working with equality and social justice charity called BRAP. They've come on board to help the NCT improve its diversity and inclusion work. We know that the Board of Trustees is much more diverse than it ever has been now. We know that there are practitioners from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and our clientele as well. I have many clients who are from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities too. So I think, representation is key and crucial. And I think there's always more work to be done. But I'm proud of NCT for taking steps to improve things in that area.
That sounds great. And, I think that's good to hear that NCT, along with, let's face it, maternity services, we've got to take more attention about our equality and diversity too. The whole maternity world does. So, yeah, times are changing, which is very, very positive.
Absolutely.
The other kind of myth, I think, that sometimes we feel within the maternity service is the kind of natural childbirth agenda. So much so that I think sometimes people feel that the N of NCT actually stands for natural childbirth, which is partly why I asked you at the beginning a bit about what NCT stood for. But there's that kind of feeling of it's birth without any intervention. That's a very strong focus. And there are benefits to that, but there are limitations and risks to that, I guess. So as an NCT teacher, how do you feel about that balance, or how you address that balance?
Yeah, so
and is it very natural childbirth focused?
That's such a good question. So I think it's really important to discuss and cover physiological birth, it's really important for women, birthing people, to understand how birth works, how a woman's body works, how she goes into labour, and the role of hormones within that. The role of oxytocin, the role of adrenaline, how all those things sort of interact with each other. So we do discuss physiological birth, how birth works, so that women know how to help themselves, so that, they understand how oxytocin works, how important it is, and they have coping strategies or ideas as to how to boost oxytocin. They know that it's important to feel safe, feel warm, feel comfortable, feel that they trust the people around them. That will all boost oxytocin. We know how important that is. We also know that there are many women who either choose or who can't have that physiological birth, who choose not to have it, or who can't, for whatever reason, have that. That's not available to them. And we would be doing a huge disservice to our clients if we didn't also discuss the other sorts of births, so cesarean birth, assisted birth, induction. It's vitally important. We know what the rates are rising of cesarean birth and induction. So as I mentioned about the framework earlier on, the antenatal education framework, and that is absolutely encompassed within that framework. So it's an and, Florence. It's not a one or the other. It's using physiological birth as your kind of, the foundation, and then building on that. So the idea is that if, for whatever reason, a woman doesn't have a physiological, straightforward vaginal birth, she can take those coping strategies, those tools that she's learnt, and adapt them or modify them in the other birth scenario that she has. We can't cover every single birth scenario. That's just not possible. But we can hopefully give people tools that they can use in any birth scenario.
Yeah, I think that's good to hear, because I think there can be a bit of an attitude and perception from healthcare workers. And I have, not recently, it's true, but I have in the past heard of people doing NCT because they wanted that social support network and kind of advice about having a new baby, who were unable to talk to their teacher or confess, in inverted commas, to the group that they're actually having a planned cesarean.
I have many clients on my courses who disclose that to me at the beginning. Actually, is this bit going to be relevant to me because I'm hoping to have a planned cesarean? And my response to that always is, all of this is relevant, because it's as I say, it's taking the skills that you learn in that particular scenario and adapting them to cesarean birth. So, for example, how are you going to stay calm, as you wait for your planned cesarean? What are you going to do in those hours that it takes for the planned cesarean to for the woman to go down to theatre? So I think
that's a very good point.
Into every course will hopefully prepare people for whatever is going to happen. And the thing that you said about healthcare professionals' perception of people who have done NCT, I find it really, really interesting. So I have met with clients at reunions after the babies have been born, and they've told me, that they've told their healthcare professional they've done NCT, and the attitude from the healthcare professional has changed in not a positive way. It's like a negative, oh well, here comes a troublemaker kind of a way.
Oh,
and I find that so interesting. And actually, what I would love is for healthcare professionals to reframe it and go, actually, they're not troublemakers. They are people. Actually, what we know is if someone has come from NCT, they are well versed or well prepped in the different sort of births and what might happen in each of those different birth scenarios. They know that they've got options. They know that they have been given a toolkit that will hopefully empower them to ask the questions, to get the information that they need, so that they can help make those decisions that are right for that woman or that birthing person, that baby in that particular situation. And wouldn't it be wonderful if healthcare professionals, when they learned that someone had done NCT, would go, brilliant, great, I know that this person is well informed, or if they're not well informed, that they know the questions to ask, so that they can have the most positive birth experience they can.
I think that's so true. So it made me think, because I just did an episode on Birth Time. Have you seen Birth Time? The documentary? And that was all about not just physical, but emotional safety. And so what we should be thinking is, great, someone's done some antenatal classes, they're well prepared, therefore they are going to have that emotional safety because they're making well-informed decisions, etc. But you're right, we absolutely don't. It's that friction between what's actually happening in the system and what our bodies are designed to do, and some of the intervention being necessary and some of the intervention being sort of fear generated.
And I think, it's so important as well for clients to understand the system that they're going into. There's always this sort of tension or this balance that NCT practitioners have to kind of walk, or to strike between preparing clients for the system, or women, birthing people, for the system they're going into, whilst also helping them understand that they do have options, that policies are for populations, not for individuals, and that it's okay to challenge that system. And when I say challenge, I don't mean going in all guns blazing, going, no, I've done NCT, I know my rights. I mean, just questioning, is this the right thing for me? Does my gut say that this is right for me? Or actually do I, what are, or just asking, what are the benefits? What are the risks about this? What else do I need to know in order to be on board with this decision?
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. So I did NCT classes, and I did feel sorry for my NCT teacher. And I did warn her up front that I was an obstetrician. And I went because I wanted to meet people and have coffee afterwards. Have a group of people who are becoming parents at the same time. That was really important to me. And also for my poor husband, who's not medical at all, I thought it'd be good for him. And we went to couples classes. And I do remember when she was teaching us about the cascade of intervention, kind of slightly biting my lip and feeling a bit uncomfortable. But I will tell you, I've got a confession for you here, Laura. So we did a lot of talk about optimal fetal positioning and positions for labour, including, I don't know if this is still taught, including the idea of taking a bucket to the hospital and sitting on a bucket.
Oh no, that's not something that I do.
And we had a lot of discussion in my NCT class when we kind of met up. Who's going to take a bucket? Are we all going to take a bucket? And I had this thing of, I cannot walk into a labour ward with a bucket. I will be a complete laughingstock, even though I'm having my baby somewhere that I've never worked. Because I worked too far away from where I lived. And so I remember agonizing for some time about whether or not I should take a bucket. And in the end, I didn't take a bucket. You never know. Maybe that's why I ended up with an emergency section. No bucket.
I mean, we talk about birth balls. So, the fact that you don't have to take your own birth ball in, that most of the time they're there.
I think a birth ball would be a hell of a lot more comfortable.
Than
but
a bucket.
Those things, they were not in the offing at the time I had my children. My children are just too old for the birthing ball. But so the NCT bucket has stuck with me forever as an NCT marker.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because
unfairly.
But that's a really good illustration, actually, of the challenges that practitioners face and that clients face. Because we can, talk a lot about lots of different births and lots of things. But what we can't do in the 17 hours that we have with people is control what they hear, how they hear it, and what's going to stick with them.
Yeah.
So actually that thing about you and the bucket, if that's what you remember from your NCT class,
Oh no, I remember lots of other stuff. My teacher, Angela, was amazing and so supportive and so lovely about the fact that I'd fessed up to her that I was an obstetrician. And actually, interestingly, one of the points at which she was at her best was actually when we went back for our reunion. Because I would say I had what we actually nicknamed her devil baby, in that she for the first few weeks of her life, she cried incessantly. And all the tips I was given about put her in the car and take her for a drive. Nope, not my baby. Have you burped her enough? Have you fed her enough? Have you changed her enough? Have you done this? Have you done that? All those things, absolutely none of them worked. And when we went back for the reunion, my teacher just said to me, Florence, why don't you just sit on the sofa in that early evening when she's going mental, have a glass of wine, just one glass, but have a glass of wine and just go with it and stop trying to control this baby that is completely off the charts. And that was really good advice, because actually it made me calm instead of me being really stressed. And I don't know whether it was that or whether it was just she grew out of it, but at 6 weeks she clicked and she became the only baby in my NCT group that slept the whole night through at 6 weeks old.
Oh my goodness.
And then evermore. And when I had my second baby, of course I expected her to do the same, and she didn't at all. And I was very disappointed. So I think, she was great. And that postnatal reunion, I did actually do some postnatal classes, because I did feel a bit like with most things in maternity, it was my antenatal classes were a little bit a drop off a cliff. You have the baby, have the reunion, and then nothing.
And this is where the sort of support network that you've just spoken about, is so vital. And one of the things I think that, that is another sort of bonus of doing NCT classes is this, I say to people as they walk in, by the end of this course, you will hopefully have this self-supporting network of people who live really close to you, who, that the amount of times we've had babies that have all been born on the same day, or, at least 2 or 3 of them have been born on the same day. So exactly what each other are going through, and you live around the corner from each other, and in this day and age where, we know that extended family might not necessarily be close by, and that sort of thing. It's invaluable, I think. So, just that it's interesting you were talking about the baby crying, because we talk quite a lot about the 4th trimester, and this idea that, actually creating as much sort of womb-like an environment as you can for babies in that sort of first trimester is it can be really beneficial for everybody. And this trying to instill some confidence in people that actually they do know their baby best, and they are doing the right thing by their baby.
So you've kind of taught by now like a whole generation of kids. You've helped mums have a whole generation of kids.
So I guess
tell me a bit about what you like about teaching, or what you don't like, or what kind of why you enjoy doing it.
Why do I enjoy doing it? So why I've been doing it for the last 10 years. I love being a small part of somebody's journey into parenthood. So I love knowing that, I've made a difference to somebody, that they've gone away knowing things either about the maternity system, or about birth, or about themselves that they might not have thought of before. I absolutely love doing the reunions, because you see these people sort of, 2 months before, who are on the cusp of parenthood, who haven't actually had their babies yet, who are questioning everything and don't know, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do this? And then you see them at the reunion and they're just getting on and doing it. I always think the fathers or the partners are always kind of juggling their babies expertly, whereas 8 weeks before they were nervously holding this sort of plastic doll going, I don't know which way is up, and all this sort of thing. And they do it anyway. So I love seeing that sort of confidence emerge. And the reason that I'm still doing it 10 years on is because there's always, times move on, maternity services move on, there's always something new. I don't think I've ever heard the same birth story twice in 10 years, which is just fascinating to me, and just goes to show how, everybody is different. Literally every single body is different, and every person, every woman, every birthing person will have a different experience. And so there's always something new to reflect on and learn and take away.
Yeah. No, I that was really interesting listening to you, actually, because I could say pretty much exactly what you've said about my own job in terms of that, trying to make a difference and being some small part of that journey, that transition to parenthood. Yeah, that was really nice to hear that coming out, actually, because it kind of was like, oh, yeah, this is why we work well together. And this also illustrates, I think, that rather than the kind of them and us that we can sometimes get into in terms of healthcare professionals and NCT or other antenatal teachers or doulas, or the other, in inverted commas, actually, we're all in it for the same reason.
Absolutely.
Of wanting to make that little difference and help people on that journey.
Yeah.
There's so much that we have in common, and yet we let some of these assumptions and things pull us apart.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all coming from the same place, essentially,
Yeah.
And I think NCT practitioners have a great deal of respect for healthcare professionals, and are very conscious of the challenges, especially at the moment, but during and post COVID. And I know NCT has done quite a lot in the past, sort of campaign to try and improve the system, as it were. And yeah, absolutely, just as you say, sort of working together. That there's no reason not to work together, I think.
Yeah, I think what you were saying then about improving the system, I think that's key, because I think sometimes, so I can think of some of the NCT reports, like the one that immediately popped into my head is I think there was a postnatal report not that long ago.
The hidden half, maybe. Possibly.
Yeah. Some of those reports are really helpful. But I equally think sometimes from inside the system, particularly if one's in a role with a bit more management responsibility, you can sometimes see some of these things as being attacked. You're not doing a good enough job doing blah, 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 rather than actually we're going to produce some data and some feedback that actually helps you then influence policymakers more to get more resources for whatever it is. So that kind of working together concept to improve things, I think sometimes it works really well, but sometimes we on the provider front can be a bit defensive.
And actually what you say there really about NCT and providers working together kind of highlights beautifully how important it is to find a platform to do that. And maternity voice partnerships are a brilliant way, I think, of bringing all those people together. I know in my NCT career, my job has been greatly enhanced by knowing what was happening at my local units, by forging relationships with the healthcare professionals who are there, and by understanding, the challenges, what was going well, what wasn't going quite so well, how we as NCT practitioners or service user representatives or whatever you want to call us, how we can help there, how we can collaborate to make things better, and how we can sort of, the messages that we can send back to clients as well. So we really felt like it was a kind of sort of go-between between the, the clients and the unit, and working together on a maternity voice partnership. I think is an ideal way of enabling, everybody in the birth world to come together. So healthcare professionals, service user representatives, and those people who are in the system, who are birthing at the time.
Yeah, and I know you did amazing things at Bromley when you were chair of the Maternity Voice Partnership there. And that's kind of how we linked up, because I saw you doing stuff and thought, oh my goodness, I really need to understand and know how this is working so well. And then we ended up doing stuff together at London level. But I do remember you kindly letting me come and sit in on an MVP meeting at Bromley to kind of see what it did well and how it worked as well as it did.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a perfect storm of everybody. It was just an amazing team at the time as well. So yes, chairing that group of individuals was just an absolute, joy at the time. Incredibly challenging, lots of trials and tribulations, but we were, it felt like we were all there trying, working towards the same purpose. So yeah,
and I think that's the other sort of important element of that, is because I've had it suggested that lay members of an MVP should be people that have had a baby within the last 2 years. And I know we've talked about this before, about having different levels of feedback and different levels of lay representation. So yes, you do need those women who've just literally used the service, but you also need people that have collated a bit more, which would be an NCT teacher or a doula or someone else providing services in that local area, to give feedback as well, because actually a woman with a young baby may not have the time or the headspace to give that feedback directly, but may feel confident and comfortable giving it to you as a third party.
Yeah, absolutely. And, also that woman, that birthing person who's just had a baby might want to be involved in a maternity voice partnership for, the time that she's on maternity leave, and then her life will go back to a different sort of normality. So, but obviously it's very important to have people who are experiencing the service for themselves on the MVP. But at the same time, I think it's really important to have some people there who have been there, for a while, or who have, have that bit more of a strategic overview. So they'd be able to say, well, actually, 2 years ago, this is how the things were, and now here we are 2 years later, and this is how things are. So they've got that they're slightly more removed, and they can kind of see the progression of things as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because, we definitely have that in my local maternity voice partnership. People tend to join when they're on mat leave, and then obviously life gets busy and they need to leave and get on with doing other things with their lives. So having a mixture is great. So I think the only other thing I'd like to think about is a zesty bit. So at the end of my podcast, I have a zesty bit, which is the kind of takeaway bit.
Do you do?
So I always try and do one thing for health professionals and one thing for women.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking for health professionals, maybe put your assumptions to one side.
Yeah.
And know and understand a little bit more about where NCT teachers are coming from, and that perhaps we're all coming from the same place, and perhaps get to know them and build some relationships with your local teachers.
Yeah, and that might be through their MVP, for example.
That might be through the MVP.
Yeah.
And also about if a woman, if they tell you they've done NCT classes, don't let that show in your face and your behaviour that you're judging people.
Don't put the shutters down.
Careful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, don't put the shutters down. Be really careful about that, because actually, I think back to your point, remember, this is a well-informed woman.
Or even if they're not well-informed, hopefully they know how to become well-informed. They've got the tools to ask the questions. They've got the
right tools to ask questions. Yeah. So I think that would be for health professionals. And then what would you want to say to someone who's pregnant who might be listening?
Consider doing NCT. Consider doing NCT and get yourself informed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the bottom line, isn't it? Wherever you feel the information is coming from, or the tools are coming from, in the right format for you, which might be NCT.
Yeah,
make yourself
informed and
prepared.
Yes, prepare yourself. Yeah, learn how to ask the questions that you'll need to ask.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Laura, for coming on and recording this with me. It's fantastic. I've been really looking forward to doing this with you.
But I can just say thank you, Florence. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm really, really happy to have spoken to you today.
I do hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode of the theobspod. Feel free to contact me on Twitter at FW or at theobspod to ask me questions, give me topics for future episodes, or let me know what you think. It's absolutely fantastic when you get in touch. I really enjoy reading your comments. As usual, I've tried to include in the programme notes some extra reading about this particular topic, both for professionals working in maternity care and for pregnant women using services. I'd like to reassure you that although I'm talking about my experiences working in maternity care, I take confidentiality very seriously and do not give any personal information about any of my patients. If you've enjoyed listening, I'd love you to recommend the theobspod to friends or colleagues, and please do leave me a review on whichever podcast directory you find my episodes. Many thanks for listening.